Hi, this is the Love Your Life Show with Susie Pettit, Certified Life and Wellness Coach. Join Susie as she helps you with your wellness and mindset so you can live a life you love. Let's go, warriors!
Oh, hello, warriors. It is me, Susie Pettit, your certified life and wellness coach. And boy, are we on a roll. I have been hearing from you guys that you were really loving and making some life changes in your life because of the podcast I've been doing recently. I did one on people pleasing and lying. Last week's was unconditional love. This week is going to be no different. You are going to love it. Yay. I am so thrilled. So today, we're getting into unconditional love and boundaries, or shall I say boundaries and unconditional love. The question is, do they go together? What do they have in common? Can they go together? Yes, yes, and yes, yes, yes. And yet there are two things that often get weaponized and used against people in ways in relationships, like they're used against people that is not serving to either party. And so yahoo you for listening in. I'm so psyched. Okay. For starters, unconditional love, I'll start with, is often spoke of as something we do and show to others. Okay. In last week's podcast, I spoke of how unconditional love is certainly something we show and do to others. However, I took it a step further for us advanced Love Your Life show listeners with the request for you to practice and focus on practicing unconditional love with yourselves. Okay. The less we love ourselves, the harder loving others is in all of their humanity and imperfections. Okay. Let me put that a different way, is that the more we love ourselves, the easier it is to love others when they're human and mess up. It is one of the least selfish things we can do, is to practice loving ourselves unconditionally, to love ourselves in our silly, human, mistake-making selves, and in our imperfections, in our messiness. Unconditional love is truly a graduate level skill that we often just sort of brush through, like, oh yeah, I unconditionally love him or her. And then when I dig deeper, there are lots of conditions around that love, including the love we have for ourselves. Okay. I think all of us listeners are capable of doing it, and I encourage us to do it. And this week I bring you that I want us to do it as long as it goes hand in hand with, drum roll, please, boundaries. Okay, because boundaries can be weaponized too. When beginning to set boundaries, or when I hear some people speak of setting boundaries, it's coming out of a place of anger and something we're doing to the other person, almost like a punishment. Okay, like someone might say, this is an example of a boundary. You can't come over anymore because you never leave when I want you to. Or I'm hanging up because you hurt my feelings. Okay. In fact, when we begin to set boundaries in relationships where we had no boundaries or very limited boundaries, the other person may actually play along with this mistruth. Okay, they may play the victim and say things like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And it can become like a boundary competition, like we're back in middle school. Like we're doing it to them and they're doing it to me. And oh yeah, well, if I can't come over, then you aren't invited to my Halloween happy hour. Trauma. Okay, these are not healthy boundaries, and this is not what we're working towards. So when you learn how to set boundaries from an expert like myself, boundaries are never done to the other person. Those sort of boundaries are set from a place of anger and control versus healthy boundaries that are set from a place of unconditional love for yourself. They're the kinds of boundaries I help my clients set. Okay, they're done from a place of care and love of self and of the relationship. They're not done to the other person out of anger. They're done out of love, which brings me back to the title of this show, Unconditional Love and Boundaries. They go hand in hand. I have yet to see a healthy, thriving relationship without healthy, thriving boundaries, my own included. Healthy relationships have healthy boundaries, period, end of story. Call me up with your examples. Email me. I will stand on that ground. Okay, so let's learn what makes a healthy boundary and how it goes hand in hand with unconditional love. If this is your first time hearing about boundaries, please keep listening. But know that this is the Boundaries graduate episode. Okay. If this is the first time you're stumbling across the Love Your Life show, yay, welcome. Okay. And know that this is sort of a little advanced. So when you're done listening, or if you're not driving right now, pause the show and type in smbwell.com/roadmap, all one word. And you'll get the podcast roadmap, which will walk you through the foundational episodes of the show to set you up for success. Okay. I have plenty of episodes that define boundaries and give you, the two basic parts of every boundary and actual scripts to say. And you'll find all of that in the roadmap. And it's super important that we start with the basics. Okay. For all of us, no matter where we are, whether you're a first time listener to the Love Your Life show, hello and welcome. Or if you're a lifer, yahoo, let's go Warriors. Okay. Let me tell you what prompted this show. It's very interesting. I was listening to an amazing podcast interview on boundaries. It really was a great interview on Glennon Doyle's podcast. I love Glennon Doyle. I'll put the link to the show that I was listening to at these show notes, smbwell.com/217, because it was a great interview. And yet, near the end, a question came up from a listener that was whether you can have unconditional love and still maintain boundaries. And while I just said I loved the rest of the conversation they had and the interview they had, I think their answer to this question missed the mark. And since I don't know when I'll be invited as a guest on Glennon's show, I wanted to address it here. Though, laugh out loud, I have heard that she's open to suggestions for future guests. So go ahead and send her an email. And maybe I'll get an invite soon. Okay. And whoa, would it be great to bring this message loud and clear to her platform? She reaches many more warriors' ears. That yes, we can have unconditional love and boundaries. In fact, I see no other healthy way to do it. Okay, so addressing the question about whether you can have unconditional love with boundaries or whether love needs to be conditional when boundaries are concerned, that their listener asked in. Okay, I want to address that. It's like the question was sort of, are boundaries a condition of love? Like, if you love me, you will XYZ. No, sorry, that's conditional love. That's a condition. Okay, say you're saying, like, if you love me, you'll turn off the TV at night. Or if you love me, you'll show me your texts on your phone. That's manipulative, codependent, and a condition. Like, do you see how that's a condition of your love? Okay, why are you making their TV use or their phone use or anything to do with you? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't have requests in relationships and compromises. But to make things conditional of your love is not necessary. My answer to the listener's question is that you must have boundaries with unconditional love. It's not an either or. It's a both and. Boundaries are a foundational part of healthy relationships, and boundaries are a part of unconditional love. And in my coaching practice, more than 90% of the relationship issues I see are because of some sort of boundary issue. When done correctly and consistently, boundaries are the backbone of healthy and thriving relationships. Where I see people get into trouble with unconditional love is they sort of use it like a self-flagellation weapon against themselves. Okay, they might say things like, well, they're my kid and I love them unconditionally, or they're my parent and I love them unconditionally, so I don't say anything. Nope. Flat out and simple, no. Unconditional love without boundaries is being a doormat. That's called self-abandonment. That is not unconditional love for yourself. And that relationship stagnates with that when you're not showing your true self to yourself. This is where it relates back to people pleasing and lying. Boundaries are simply guidelines for how we will be treated in relationship with others. They're not something we do to another person. The other person gets to be them. Okay. It's like you have a manual for yourself where you set forth guidelines for how you will be treated. For example, some boundaries I have for those who are in relationship with me is that I don't allow people to yell at me. And I don't allow people to call me names. It doesn't matter who they are. Like, I have this little manual. If you want to be in a relationship with Susie, you can't yell at me and you can't call me names. Okay. In my manual, I don't necessarily have to say those boundaries aloud to everyone I meet. For example, when I get in an Uber, I'm not like, hey, can you take me to the airport? And by the way, I don't allow people to yell at me or call me names. Like, I don't need to say it to everyone. However, if my boundary is violated or crossed, I speak up. I speak of it kindly, I don't use it as anger against someone, but I speak up. So think of this example that plays out in many households. Let's just say where you have a teenager who's in the middle of, friend drama, which is a normal part of teen development. Okay. You have the thought, poor kid, I remember what that's like. That sucks. And you pour love on them. They might be a little quieter at dinner. They aren't chatty or engaging much, yet you show them unconditional love. You love them when they're sad. You pour love on them. Fast forward to dinner being over and you ask them to do their family responsibility of clearing the table. They start yelling. They say, I can't believe you're asking me to clear the table with everything I'm going through. You're so stupid. You're the dumbest mom ever. Maybe they add that one on there for a little cherry on top. Yes, unconditional love is continuing to pour love on them by possibly thinking the thought, wow, she's quite emotional right now. Or, ooh, wow, he's not acting like himself. Okay, you can choose thoughts that lead you to still feel love and compassion for them. You get to choose to not take her reaction personally, like an emotional child. Okay, you don't need to make it into a bigger drama or make it mean something about you or your relationship. Rather, it's just a sign your teen has big emotions that she's feeling right here, right now, period. That's allowed. We're allowed to have big emotions. Where relationships can become unhealthy is if the action you take from that feeling line from the violates a boundary. Okay. And so if you don't uphold your boundary and say, like, I don't say anything and I take the brunt for her or his emotional unregulation, that would look like me saying maybe, oh, wow, you sure are having a tough time. I'll clear the table. Why don't you go get some dessert? Or any variation of that, not addressing the boundary violation. Okay. Maybe she says that or he says that and then storms off and you don't do anything. Okay. That's being a doormat. That's not healthy in relationships. Okay. With those two boundaries or guidelines that I have for people, what I was sharing below, instead of me brushing the behavior aside and not addressing it, I'd say, hey, I don't allow people to yell at me. Or remember, I don't let people call me names. I'm going to leave the room while you clear the table. And when you're done, come on in and we can talk about what's going on. Can you see how that's unconditional love? You're not getting all dramatic and mean and don't you dare talk to me that way. You're just saying, hey, I don't let people talk to me like that. So I'm going to leave. You have a requirement to do. And when you're done, come on in. Relationships without these clearly stated boundaries are the gateway to feeling resentful, irritated, and annoyed. Think about it. How would I be feeling when I'm cleaning the table? Like if I said to her, okay, if I didn't say anything, or if I was just like, all right, I'll clean the table, you go get dessert. I see you're having a hard time. Okay, I know myself. I'll tell you how I'm feeling. I'd be feeling irritated, annoyed, frustrated. Why does she talk to me like that? Okay, because I let her. Secondly, from this specific example, the parenting side of it, I would be modeling behavior I really don't want to encourage. Okay, when I say, okay, I'll clear the table, okay, or if I don't say anything at all, what am I teaching her or him? What am I teaching my child? That they can explode out their emotions on other people without consequences. Okay, that is not a lesson I want to teach them. At best, this leads to raising entitled kids. Done repeatedly, it's called emotional abuse warriors. Okay, that's not our intent, I'm sure. We're not like, oh yeah, sure, just keep walking all over the people in your life. That's not what I'm setting up. So today, let's agree that healthy relationships, those with unconditional love, go hand in hand with boundaries. It's a both and. We don't set boundaries because the other person has done something wrong or that they're wrong. We can love on them. We can understand their situation. We can think thoughts that create feelings of love for them. That's unconditional love. And we set boundaries as a guideline for how we want to be treated. It's more of a proactive tool we have because we unconditionally love them and ourselves. Okay. And ourselves. We've chosen to have some guidelines for how to be in relationship with ourselves. We don't let people just walk all over us. Do you see how wonderful that is? Okay, you don't have to be irritated or annoyed by them to set a boundary. You don't have to be angry to take an action to set a boundary or to act in a way that serves you. You can love them and set the boundary. Okay, you can love that. You can say, I love you, and I don't allow people to yell at me. I'm going to go in the other room. I love you, and I can't visit right now. Okay? I love you, and I didn't answer the phone because I was in the middle of a nap or I was in the middle of watching a show I like. Okay? There are lots of ways to set boundaries that leave you not as a doormat, and they have to go hand in hand. Okay? That's it for this week. I consider myself a boundary expert. Not only have I been formally trained in boundary setting and relationship coaching, I have lived this, warriors. I have set some of the hardest boundaries there are to set while still unconditionally loving those people that I'm in relationship with. I have come out the other side stronger and in healthier relationships. Okay, so please let me know if you have questions or you want more about this, more actual scripts, like words to say. If you're sort of in that first situation I had about like TV at night and you're like, what do you mean I can say something different? Or you've got the teen at home, or you have the husband who you just feel like, I'll tell you one thing. One of the main emotions to watch out for is irritated or frustrated or annoyed. I just gave you 3. Okay. Any of those emotions, that usually is a sign a boundary has been crossed. Then we need to step back and be like, did I state that boundary? So if you're feeling irritated or annoyed, or like, let me know, email me. We could do a Q&A podcast if there's interest. Okay. We could do like, send me your questions on how to set a boundary with your, I don't know, adult child or your husband or your boss or your mother-in-law. Let me know by emailing me at susie@smbwell.com or DM me on Instagram. I answer all my own direct messages. Boundary work is vast, simple, though it's not easy. We were not modeled this. I like to think that with all the parents taking my parenting teen class right now and our new knowledge of emotional intelligence, the next generation will have an easier time with boundaries and use interdependent instead of codependent techniques because of all the hard work you awesome boundary bosses or you awesome warriors are doing. Okay. And I'm going to say, keep learning. Okay. Keep going to Boundary Bootcamp by listening to my podcast, doing the work, doing the journaling. If you have not taken my parenting teens class, please, it is such a low cost investment. I did it because I want to change the way we raise our children. Okay? If you have a child between ages 10 to 25, this course is for you. Don't let your brain tell you it's not. It's an amazing opportunity. And then bring your questions to coaching sessions. Email them to me if you're not a client. Boundaries and unconditional love are the gateway to freedom. Okay, you matter so deeply to me, and I want that for you. Big love to you, you awesome warrior. Keep on, keep it on.
Thank you for listening to the Love Your Life show. If you want to hear more from Susie and support the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, leave a review and share this podcast with friends and family. Go get 'em, warriors.